Early in 1925, headlines across the United States briefly focused on an intensely local and specific story. A man in central Kentucky was stuck in a cave. His name was Floyd Collins, he was 37 years old, and he had spent countless hours exploring the dark tunnels, chambers, and cascades under Barron County. It wasn't the first time he had lost his light underground, it wasn't the first time he had faced a squeeze, and he assumed when he was found a day after the cave-in that trapped his legs, it would be a fairly simple process to extract him from the cave he had so easily wriggled into. It was not. Collins had underestimated his own caving ability. What felt to him like an easy scramble, only 60 feet underground, was a near impossibility to most people, both physically and mentally. Sand Cave, where he was trapped, was unstable, narrow, and, like all caves, smotheringly dark. Men would go in to give Collins a drink of water or a sandwich and come out trembling, having barely made it halfway to his position. 100 hours later, Collins was still in the cave. A few people had made it to him. His brother, a reporter, a firefighter. They planned to tie a rope around Collins and pull him out, even though the walls of the cave could shred his body like knives, even though, as a doctor warned, the rope might stretch his organs like taffy. Collins begged them to pull him out, even if they had to pull his foot off, but they couldn't. While the folks in the cave struggled to think of anything that could rescue Collins, the rest of the country was wrapped, with newspapers running headlines from coast to coast. People hung on every word. The horror of the situation, the drama of the rescue attempts. It was electric. No one could tear themselves away. 6 days after the first cave-in, officials decided that their best chance of rescue was to dig an entirely separate tunnel in from the surface. It indeed might have been their best chance of rescue, but it wasn't enough. 14 days, 2 full weeks after he trapped himself in a cave that others could barely enter, Floyd Collins had died. And what was the rest of the country left with? A gaping fascination at what lies beneath us, a fixation with the blackness. Congress regulated the area around Collins Cave in part to try and regulate the stream of wannabe explorers plunging into their own underground worlds. You might have heard what resulted. Mammoth Cave National Park. Today, it's the longest known cave network in the world. 2 million people visit that park a year. Because despite its origins, despite the involuntary shudder that descriptions of it cause, despite the fact that it is easier in every single respect to simply stay above ground, we just can't resist it. It is, in one of the most literal ways possible, a call of the void. For many years, we thought the bottom of the world lay in the Krubera Cave, 6,824 feet below the Caucasus Mountains. What does being in a cave feel like? Let's start with the basics. It's dark. It's really dark. Water and air may trickle past the first room of a cavern, but light is bound to just a couple feet of the entrance. Once you've taken a turn deeper, you're surrounded by true black, no stars. You can stand in the dark with your light off for as long as you want, and your eyes will never adjust. It seems like, after crawling through a passage, that it should hold a little residual light. It feels like it should remember you were there, that if you look back, the rock you just prostrated yourself on should look a little less alien than the ones you haven't yet touched. But it doesn't. As soon as you turn your lamp away, that area fades back into the void, and once it returns to the void, nothing is familiar. I said multiple times out loud, "There's no way that's the way we came from." I was wrong. And thankfully, I was with people in the cave who were much smarter than me, but I couldn't shake the what-ifs from my head. What if I had stumbled in here alone? What if my light went out? What if all I had was my sense of touch and the sound of caverns, trying to understand the walls of rooms that barely made sense when illuminated? Caves are dark, but they aren't silent. They sound wet, because they are. Thousands of tiny currents of water, individual drops and streams and rivers cutting their way through the rock on a timescale that none of us will live to see. The sounds of water echo through a cave, precisely enough that I felt like I could hear a single drop falling off a stalactite a dozen yards away. Simultaneously, though, caves swallow sound, muting voices and movements just a few feet from me. And the combination of these two contradictory effects is absolutely uncanny. It seems like everything about a cave is built to mess with how we usually take in the world. The light is gone, the sounds don't make sense, and the space itself is... I mean, this is the real map that my guide handed me before I came in. Look at this. Oh, this clears everything up. And what's more, I feel like I could memorize this hallowed nightmare fuel and it wouldn't even begin to scratch the complexity of the actual cavern. Because there's no way this paper can capture the three-dimensionality of these passages. There were times when we'd be walking one direction, drop down 5 feet, and then turn around and start crawling back in exactly the same direction, but somehow under the exact rocks we had been walking on before. I have no idea how many floors this place had. 4? 10? 30? Caves are, as much as any geological formation can be, alive.
Caves breathe, have active circulatory, digestive, and excretory systems, can contract disease and suffer injuries and heal many of both, and are constantly growing, just like any other living body.
And I've already made clear my thoughts on living spaces. The strangest thing of all to me, though, was that there always did seem to be a way forward. Hundreds of feet underground, through pitch-black rooms and shoulder-width hallways, there was always a way forward. It straddled this bizarre tightrope. Obviously, no human would have ever designed a space like this, and yet there were just enough accommodations that I felt like I should be traversing it. It hit me like a stalactite to the face. I know this kind of space. Caves are superstructures. And few places portray that superstructure like depth and somehow welcoming hostility, like the Krubera Cave, stretching for miles below the western Caucasus mountain range. This is where a group of explorers thought they would find the true deepest place on Earth. There are two main features of Krubera. First are the chutes. These are the things that allowed it to be a contender for the deepest cave. They are what feel like bottomless pits, places where the stone just drops away for hundreds and hundreds of feet. This is the howling nothing that pulled the team forward. This is where it was exceptionally easy to lean the wrong direction on your descent rig and fall until you hit the living rocks below. Then there are the hard parts. They're called meanders, and they're the warped tunnels in between the chutes. For the Krubera team, who were hoping to find the bottommost point of the cave, meanders were what halted their progress. One such time, 5,800 feet underground, the team felt well and truly stuck. Until a breakthrough. The cavers found a way forward through a 300-foot-long tunnel they called the Way to the Dream. Ironically, this tunnel is about as nightmarish as anything I can imagine. The walls and roof were jagged with knife-sharp rock, and it was so narrow that you couldn't even fit through on your hands and knees. It was a belly crawl the entire way. I seriously can't stop thinking about those spaces underground. How elemental they felt, how untouched, how unnervingly welcoming they were. I felt it most when I was sidling along a passage too narrow to pass through straight on, my hands bracing against the wall and my feet skirting through the murky water on the ground. Why would this corridor be exactly this size? Why not so narrow I didn't have a chance of fitting through, or so wide I couldn't see the other side? Why did it feel made for me? And I could imagine just continuing down into these caverns for days, always finding another passage, always squeezing myself through another opening. I would tell myself that just down this route, everything would make sense. I would push myself further, because the caves seemed to ask me to. I would wander in a constant conversation with these growing, living walls. The call of the void is rarely more apt than when talking about the depths. I felt it well within that cave, and in fiction too, the depths are consistently linked to that alluring feeling of self-destruction. In Playdead's Inside, the game initially appears to follow the language of many 2D games, that is, left to right. But there's a much more insidious journey here, one much more resonant to the game's themes, and one impossible to ignore once you know what's happening. A descent. Plotted out, it feels like the boy is in free fall, always sinking deeper into the earth, into the water, into the horrible depths of whatever's happening inside. One of the most chilling parts of the game for me is the first moment that really highlights this descent. This submarine, when you first get it, feels like a blessing. No longer do you have to worry about holding your breath. Now you can explore these flooded hallways with confidence and light and power. And then, just when you've started to get comfortable, you smash through some loose boards in the floor and find yourself it's just so big and so empty and so... This is the first time in the game we haven't been able to see the floor. It never even occurred to me that we wouldn't be able to see the floor, but here we are, floating above oblivion, and it's not claustrophobia anymore, and it's not the fear of drowning, it's just those depths. It's why, by the end, everything feels so off. This laboratory might be almost normal, but how could it be when we've been tumbling downward for hours? How could it be normal thousands of feet below the surface? And when you burst out into what's seemingly outside again in the finale, it feels impossible. We know implicitly what shouldn't be on the other side of that wall. More labs, maybe, or a sheer rock wall, or just a blackness, infinite and welcoming. But not the surface again. Never the surface. We're in too deep. In Jeff VanderMeer's Annihilation, a team of scientists exploring a geographic aberration discover, well, they find a spiral staircase leading downward. But almost immediately, the protagonist recontextualizes the staircase in her head. It's not a tunnel, it's a tower. She insists that it's a tower. She's frustrated that the others don't recognize it as what it is, which is clearly a tower. The book doesn't really explain why she insists on this nomenclature, but the dominance of the staircase in her mind, and in ours as readers, hints at the reason. Though the spiral sinks into the earth rather than towering above it, its presence is always felt, implicitly visible from every part of the infected area. Every event that happens in the story, every clash with another character or new mystery that presents itself, the biologist mentally returns to the tower, and I did as well. We both knew from the second it was discovered that nothing could be truly known about this world without descending into that tower. And in the end, she does, plunging into what is ultimately a genuine eldritch horror. But for me, the unexplored tower was the more powerful idea, always beckoning her back, always present in our mind's eye. The idea that you don't even have to be in the depths to feel their influence, that simply knowing they're there is enough. After the way to the dream, the cavers found themselves stuck again, 5,888 feet underground. The only potential way forward was through an underwater passage, but because the way to the dream was so narrow, they couldn't bring any scuba equipment with them. They would have to dive into the sump, blind and unassisted, and hope beyond hope that there was a way forward. And they did. There's a phenomenon called a moulin, detailed by Robert Macfarlane in his magnificent book Underland. A moulin is essentially an ice funnel. Glaciers are not solid. They're perforated like the Earth with tunnels and chambers, and in a moulin's case, sheer hypnotizing drops. The funnels are created by water racing along the top of a glacier, eventually finding a weak point in the ice and plunging down into it. The walls of a moulin are smooth and blue, like polished glass. They are often as deep as the glacier itself. They roar with the amount of water pouring through them. Macfarlane notes that across cultures and countries, stories are common of explorers crashing through the ice into a chasm, presumably dying, and yet re-emerging from the glacier days or weeks later. Their own resurrection from under the frozen world. He and other authors have also noted the uncanny pull that the moulins specifically have. An outdoor blogger named Dave Gallagher referred to a moulin as his own Moby Dick, living in his mind for years after he first experienced it. I know I have also read, though I cannot find where, stories of the near hypnosis that the smooth glass can impart, stories of people feeling driven to throw themselves in. For now, those stories exist as my own personal mythos. In the Chinese room's Dear Esther, the protagonist is reborn through caves, water, and depths. Delirious from fever and injury, he stumbles once, twice, 3 times deeper into a cave on the apparition of a Hebridean island his mind has created. The first fall takes him from the surface into the caverns. The second, from the caverns into a slick waterfall basin. The third, from a luminescent stone chimney to a highway underwater, lost in time. This is the underworld made manifest as it exists in stories, religions, myths, the highway where the memory of his loved one is trapped, the hospital bed where she took her last breath. It is everything about the depths, at once overwhelming. The darkest recesses of his mind, trapped in the literal deepest part of the world, under so many miles of pressure he can barely see the surface. His re-emergence from each underworld is, too, simultaneous. Surfacing from the water, as clear-headed as he's been, walking out of the cave onto the shore. There is no separation of the mental and physical depths in Dear Esther. They are one and the same. There is, sometimes, danger to unearthing the depths. Like the undersea creatures that have lived their lives with 26,000 feet of water as a ceiling, creatures that quite literally melt when taken to the surface. They were never meant to see the light of day. Or spent uranium, maybe the single most dangerous refuse of our species. A material that will stay dangerous after the death of our children's children's children. A power source used once, then radiating farther into the future than we can possibly imagine. What is it like to create something that could kill a civilization 100,000 years, 1,000,000 years from now? How do you bury something so deep that it never comes up, not after history and language and maybe even species has been wiped away and started anew? It's the absurd challenge that faces every nuclear waste disposal plant. And, of course, it's a challenge that's more or less impossible to test. In Underland, Macfarlane details the Waste Isolation Pilot Project in New Mexico, a tomb for our nuclear waste set to be sealed about 15 years from now. Half a mile underground, the rooms containing the waste will be intentionally collapsed, then sealed with 13 layers of concrete and soil. And then the salt will start to drip. Because the WIPP is buried in a salt bed millions of years old, slowly that salt will crawl into every crevice, fill in every space left behind. The salt will confine the radiation better than we ever could. We're still not sure if it's good enough though. Acres of salt and concrete and radiation buried in a desert that frequently reaches over 105 degrees seems like it would dissuade anyone from coming near. But then again, so does living under miles of pitch black water. If it exists, we will attempt to uncover it. And so, there's another layer of protection. The waste site in New Mexico will be surrounded by dozens of 25-foot-high granite pillars surrounding a wall of earth which surrounds more pillars, which surrounds a granite room engraved with a warning written in English, Spanish, Russian, French, Chinese, Arabic, and Navajo. The warning will read, "We are going to tell you what lies underground, why you should not disturb this place, and what may happen if you do."
El sitio era conocido como el WIP, o el sitio de la planta piloto de aislamiento de residuos cuando cerró en el año 2038 AD.
Отходы были созданы при производстве ядерного оружия, также известного как атомная бомба.
我们制造的问题不是孩子的责任。
هذه الرسالة تحذير من الخطر.
T'ado gone hanagede do ba nijit ida yowe.
Will it work? I want to believe yes. But imagine us, a new species, finding an ancient monument with strange lettering, ominous pictograms, and thousands of feet of obelisks surrounding it. Imagine us breaking into a tomb, disregarding the cries and promises of long-dead civilizations. Finally, after the underwater tunnel and the way to the dream and thousands upon thousands of feet of descent, the team reached a chamber from which they could go no lower. 6,824 feet underground, they found the lowest part of that cavern and they gave it an appropriate name: Game Over. The Krubera isn't the deepest cave in the world, by the way. Not anymore. Just 2 years ago, a team found a neighbor that was actually some 400 feet deeper, the Virovkina Cave in Georgia. It seems naive to think that this is actually the deepest cave. There are always further passages. There's always a way to keep going. But sometimes there's no way to come back. Cardboard Computer's Kentucky Route Zero is a game that takes place largely underground, sometimes specifically, sometimes in a more nebulous sense. What's ever present, no matter the locale though, is a feeling of pressure. Because Earth is rarely the only thing the characters of this game are under. To a person, each is grappling with the perils of the world above. Some are old horrors like alcoholism and grief. Some are a sadistic modern twist, as the game refers to it, a new kind of debt. You get the sense that the characters felt, on some level, like they'd be able to escape the surface's horrors. The Zero, enigmatically referred to from the very first scene, is supposedly an underground highway through the caves to help the characters get to where they're going. But as the story stretches on, the promise of escape and the promise of the Zero fades. There's still a destination in mind, but the steps to get there seem increasingly obtuse. They have to double back, stumble blindly, struggle to stay afloat, and all the while, the horrors compound. All the while, the debt piles up. Far from an escape, the caves of Kentucky Route Zero seem to magnify the pressures that each character is running from. What drove them from the surface world now traps them here. That constant weight threatens to prevent them from ever returning. Kentucky Route Zero may resemble an actual cave more than any other game in existence. It meanders, it's dark. It feels impossible to fully wrap one's head around. It is absolutely bursting with strange beauty. And in the end, we're faced once again with death and rebirth, like an explorer disappearing under a glacier, or a man who disappears into his own underground world. Kentucky Route Zero takes place in Mammoth Cave in Kentucky. It's a national park established on the death of a man trapped in a cave. Floyd Collins's cave is probably connected to Mammoth somehow, if you followed those sandy tunnels deep enough. That discovery has been walled off for now, though. Sand Cave is gated, bolted, and welded closed. You'd think this wouldn't be necessary, that no one would want to enter the hellish chute where a man died a prolonged death in the dark and the still. But we gate it regardless. Because there is an inexplicable, irrational, irresistible pull to these worlds. There is a void, and it indeed does call. Come, see what lies a little deeper.
This world is not my home. I'm just passing through. My treasures and my hopes are placed beyond the blue. Many friends and kin have gone on before, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, oh Lord, what will I do? Angels beckon me to heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. I have a loving mother up in glory land, and I don't expect to stop until I shake her hand. She's waiting there for me in heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, oh Lord, what will I do? Angels beckon me to heaven's open door, feel at home.